Good evening. I'm Juan Frescas, and this is my evidence number one for the class of effective presentations. During this presentation, I will talk about the tips and key elements that I have learned so far during the class. For this, I mean the key elements that can help you during a presentation. I will talk more about it later. I will also talk about tips for graphic elements during a presentation. I will also talk about that later. And at the end, I would also like to talk about the area of opportunities that my presentations have. Mine own, maybe you can identify some of my mistakes and try to fix it if you have ones as well. And a personal reflection of what have I learned so far in the class. And well, the first thing I want to talk about is graphic elements. As as we know, graphic elements refers as the things, objects, uh, themes, etc., that can help during a presentation, or better said, that you have to take into consideration during a presentation so it can be more effective, have less distractions, help you send a message more effectively, etc. However, for me, the most important graphic elements that everyone should take into consideration are tone, color, contrast, balance, and energy. By tone and color, I mean that depending on the type of presentation that you are giving and the public you want to reach, a topic that I will talk about it later, you should take into consideration the color and the tone of your presentation as a whole, including the images you use and the color of the font you're using. Because, well, depending on the public you want to reach, there are some colors that are, well, disrespect I wouldn't say disrespectful, more like are not appropriate for the occasion. For example, let's say that you are doing a presentation about other COVID deaths that have occurred in our state. You wouldn't use a bright pink color, for example. It's just not appropriate. You have to take those elements in consideration. You also have to take into consideration the psychology of color, or color psychology. Uh, because, well, that's also very important. Colors have emotions, and depending on the type of presentation, something that again I'm going to talk about later, you have to take it into consideration. That being said, you also need to know the contrast. By contrast, I mean a color that looks good or goes well with another color. For example, right now I'm using a white background. That means I have to use dark or simply colors different to white in the fonts and in the images. Otherwise, it will be hard to read the title of the content or see an image. It also matters that the contrast helps the presentation look better. But for me, the most important part about contrast is making sure that the presentation as a whole is legible. Giving the same example, of the background, if I have a dark background, I need light colors so I can stand, so the important information can stand out as well as the images. We also have balance, which basically means, well, it can mean two things. It basically can mean the space between objects or the amount of objects you have in your presentation. I'm kind of a simplistic guy, so I believe that a slide on a presentation shouldn't have more than two or three images. And a basic rule, very few words. For me, it's very important to have an important balance between words and images. For example, there are very few words here, so I decided to put a big image because, well, I didn't need more than one, and it looks better that way. And lastly, the hierarchy. By this, it means that hierarchy means that is the order in which you put objects in a presentation. I couldn't I couldn't put a specific example in this presentation because, well, I was not talking about a sequence or something or that kind of stuff. However, if you can look closely, I put a hierarchy in the words because for me the most important thing is tone, then color, then contrast, then balance, and lastly hierarchy. And well, basically, it's the order of importance in which you want to present the elements of your presentation And well, that's it. Secondly, here are some tips on how you can make a successful presentation. First and most importantly, you need a plan. You just can't start putting slides over and over again. You need to think what you're going to say. And if you're a really nervous person like me, you need to practice a little bit. And well, a good plan always help in case of the presentation is well. If you go by a hierarchy, like I said before, or like an order, the presentation can be more effective. You also need to take into consideration what kind of presentation you want to make. You don't need a persuasive presentation when you are just, I don't know, presenting the results of an exam, etc. You need to know what kind of presentation you need for that topic you need and the kind of message you want to give. Sorry, excuse me. Uh, because, well, like I said, if you use an inappropriate type of presentation, maybe people will interpret it differently. You also need to improve your communication skills, like, for example, referring as we. I just noticed I haven't said it as much. I apologize. Making eye contact for obvious reasons. I cannot make eye contact right now, but that kind of stuff. Also, try not to distract yourself too much. Have free hands. Express with your body. And lastly, you need to know your audience, your public. You need to know who you are telling the information to. I cannot give the same type of presentation to a young audience to and I don't know to the government. It's just different. They understand things differently. They need different examples, etc. As long as you make a plan, make sure you're doing an appropriate type of presentation. Improve your communication skills and know your audience. You will make a successful presentation. Reflection and conclusion. The conclusion is that during presentations, either making or at the moment of presenting, you need to take into consideration the graphic elements you are using. Make sure that well you're using it at your favor, not against you, and that you need to have plans. You need to mainly you need to be relaxed and most importantly be organized more than anything and have planned the presentation. In that aspect, I want to admit that personally, I think that the graphic elements. I'm not a graphic designer, but I think that I can make okay presentations. And maybe that's a bit egoistic on my part, but I think that my presentations are okay, not too dramatic and yet presentative. However, I recognize that I need to improve my communication skills, especially because, well, I usually stop and stutter a lot. And I think also my body movement, but then again, that's not something that you can see right now. And well, maybe I also need to improve my knowing my audience and my public, but I guess that's something I can learn in practice. So that's it. Thanks for your attention.